4 and X are former hosts from Battleford 3 Mylan who have a pretty set-in-stone friendship that dates all the way back to 2009. But this friendship is one that always seemed pretty strange to me, as 4 is not at all a good friend towards X most of the time, killing, or despawning I guess, X twice. The two have completely different personalities, and yet they are still always friends in the end. This complicated relationship is what I'm going to be talking about in this video, and just to set some barriers, I'm only going to be talking about events within BFDI that are completely canon. So just ignore X finds out his value in the subscriber specials, because those aren't canon. The absolute earliest date we can see 4 and X canonically is in 2009, from TPOT 20. Right off the bat, we can see that the two are already established friends, before trying to help X figure out his value. However, when 3 asks to have her and 5's ball back, 4 just throws the ball really hard at 5 for some reason. When I guess that's because 5 accidentally bumped into him and said, "Oh brother." But like, why? Anyway, even in this first scene, we can see that 4 is already an extremely aggressive and strange character that foreshadows how we see him 8 or so years later. Skipping to the moment where 1 kills 3, with 4 and X now having powers thanks to a Yoyolite. After 3's death, 4 runs off of X to where the Yoyolite was located, in order to, I assume, protect X. This is a sort of rare scene in the show where 4 takes on a sort of parental role, very heavily protecting X. When 1 also gets there, 4 is seen being, once again, extremely protective over X. This being what overall motivates him to trap 1 in the moon. He feared that what happened to Dre would happen to X, saying, "I can't let you hurt anyone else, not X." Meaning that, at this time, he had a very deep friendship in him and would not want anything bad happening to him, even though he does retcon this in the future. Now the period between 2009 and 2017 is sort of mysterious for 4 and X, as all the possible information we have about the two is from BFB 30 and TPOT 21. But what we do know is that 4 and X went to the same planet that BFDI takes place on, probably right after all the Algebralians started leaving the Algebralian planet. What I assume is the first we see of them on this planet is when the two of them are watching BFDI on a TV outside, to which 2 encounters them, but they leave like right after, with 4 claiming to not know who they are. Sometime after this, we see that the two are now living together in a house, implying that the two are still very stable and close friends. Perhaps during this time, the two became extremely close friends, especially X, which may explain why he sticks so close to 4 even though 4 treats him horribly in the future. 4 has now become obsessed over BFDI, wanting to be a host on it. This maybe explains his ruthless behavior when he does become the host, as he is heavily influenced by the announcer, who, even though he was way tamer than 4 in every way, did put his contestants in danger on multiple occasions. We might hopefully get more information regarding this time period in IDFB, maybe seeing how 4 suddenly shifts to being a pretty much completely different character from what he was before hosting the show. Because seriously, how does he go from this
This is my favorite scene of this episode,
to this? Anyway, now we can finally get to 4 and X's season, BFB! We meet 4 when he crushes Black Hole down to a smaller size, immediately presenting himself as a very powerful being, mutilating Pin and overall coming across as very strange. He even screeches X, for some reason. He does eventually recover the 2 contestants that he murdered though, and this may be the very reason why he torments the contestants so much. He knows that he is able to recover them whenever, and this knowledge makes him feel like killing the contestants or hurting them has no consequences. However, as for him hurting X, I don't know. We see much later that X is recoverable by him, but the thing is that X is an Algebralian like him. I don't understand why 4 would hurt X, especially after all the stuff that went down with 3. Putting that aside, 4 presents a BFDI to the contestants, to which all 64 of them are on board, effectively starting BFB. And then he screeches poor X, "Stop doing that, 4! With teams established, 4 announces that the first contest is to get X's baskets, which is honestly nice of him to still care about X even after hurting him twice. However, this also shows how inconsistent 4's kindness towards X can be. One second he's screeching him, and the other he's supporting him. In the following episode, the two actually cooperate pretty well at the cake at stake, with the only really negative thing happening between them is 4 using X as a stand for the tray of cakes, which shows how inconsistent 4 is and how strangely little he thinks of X, at least at this time. That's pretty much all that happens between the two in this episode, but I will say that 4 is starting to get increasingly more aggressive. Not really towards X, but towards the contestants, straight up yelling out the contest. In BFB 3, this trend of aggressiveness in 4 rises, this time towards both X and the contestants. After nearly killing Gelatin, 4 makes fun of X just because he corrected him. Making fun of X is not all he does though, as he also sends him to the burn center. Dude, all he did was correct you, 4. You gotta chill out. When X does return though, 4 makes the poor guy cry by saying that no one noticed that he was gone. This downright cruel attitude that 4 adopts is honestly sad and makes me feel really bad for X. He does nothing wrong and yet 4 still treats him horribly. Moving on to the next episode. In this episode, all that really happens between the two is 4 getting angry at X for a translation mistake with the votes, screeching X and making him fall and cry. Despite this, X still helps 4 with the cake at stake and the challenge. This really shows how loyal X is towards 4, but no matter how loyal he is, 4 simply does not give back this energy to X, making this friendship a bit one-sided by this point. Now, in BFB 5, things are a bit normal between the two until X says,
Bye,
something that 4 wanted to say. 4 claims that he'll do something much worse than screeching X, and off screen, 4 cuts one of X's legs off. Oh my goodness, 4, what the heck? 4 does send X to the Limerick Attachment Center, so I guess he does have some kind of remorse, albeit a bit twisted. We see X return with bandages to help assist 4 in the challenge, and I'm starting to see a bit of a trend here. No matter what 4 does to X, he always helps 4 no matter what, making me feel even more bad for X because he deserves literally none of the bad treatment 4 gives him. Next episode, we see 4 aggressive and outrageous behavior reach a peak towards the contestants, finally making a better name than that strategize a plan to get rid of him. Surprisingly, at the cake at stake, 4 allows X to recite the votes of Beep's team members. However, right after this, a better name than that strategy works and 4 is merged into Donut. X escaped at the last second though, because he was scared. So now that 4 is gone and X is in hiding, we have to skip episode 7 and 8 as 4 and X don't even appear in them. Technically, we do see X inside of Fires though. X takes over as host in episode 9 when he is found, and clearly struggles, which shows us how dependent he is on 4 and really does look up to him as a sort of guiding figure. In BFB 10, the contestants decide to bring 4 back, and when he is brought back, X immediately runs to 4 to hug him, stating that he missed him, despite all the things 4 has done to him. And 4 is actually pretty kind towards X. Even when you think he's gonna do something bad to him, he just sort of tricks you. Not much happens in the next episode between the two, but what is important to note is that X corrects 4 on the challenge number, but instead of 4 getting angered like past times, 4 doesn't do anything at all, letting X demonstrate the contest as well. The two are finally in a nice friendship, and by this time 4 has probably realized his wrongdoings and is now trying to better himself towards X. Next episode, the two swap bodies and 4, disguised as X, gets mad and slaps X, disguised as 4, for leaning on him. This is a bit of a strange interaction because for the past 2 episodes we have seen 4 and X's relationship slowly get better, but now it's reminiscent of how it was at the start of BFB. X still hosts the cake at stake even though 4 does get a bit mad at him for getting some things incorrect. At the end of the episode, the two have a pretty friendly argument over a bad joke. This episode did have some moments that suggest a conflict between the two, but still, it seems like we're seeing a trend where the two's friendship is getting better. Anyway, next episode. While presenting the challenge to the contestants, 4 says this.
I can't let that happen because I must be X's only treasure.
Which wow, I guess 4 really does care about X after all. However, this also kind of shows that 4 is maybe a bit strict on X in a way, but putting that aside, it is clear that the two are friends on both ends by this point, despite what 4 has done. Now we have to skip all the way to BFB 16, because
X is hurtling toward Earth's center at 2,763 miles an hour.
When 2 comes to split the show, 4 automatically assumes that X is going to switch to TPOT as well, not really allowing X to explain himself, and tells him to leave. X does what 4 asked him to do, and stays with 2. Now I don't really understand this. If 4 just allowed X to talk, then he wouldn't have to go and get him back in the next episode, which I'll get into soon. I understand that 4 was sad and all, but just let X talk. With X now with 2 because 4 told him to be with them, the show has now officially split, meaning that we'll now be getting into post-split BFB. After hurting Balloony, 4 is clearly depressed now that X is gone, not knowing about his whereabouts. Even though all of this could have easily been prevented in the previous episode, but whatever. Like in BFB 13, we can see that 4 does deeply care about X, in this case, not wanting to be separated from him, even though he told him to leave. He bases the challenge off this, it being to retrieve X. After the contestants do retrieve X, 4 is really happy that X is back, which is nice to see, with the both of them being satisfied that they're back together. In BFB 18, after 4 screeches Lollipop, X says,
"4, you promised me no more screeching."
This is surprising because that would have meant that 4 would have had to realize that screeching people was wrong, and him showing that he does have remorse and agreeing with X finally shows that he is growing to be a much less violent person. Even though he does kill Lollipop a few seconds later, albeit accidentally. When the challenge ends, 4 and X speak at the same time on how the teams did, which I gotta admit is pretty wholesome. Next episode, we see 4 being protective over X's aloe vera garden, but later dismisses it in favor of the show going on, allowing the contestants to walk on in much to the dismay of X. But then later 4 does want to help out X, making the challenge to help X's plants grow. It seems to me that 4 puts aside X in favor of the show. Later, when X explains to Lollipop why he wants to grow aloe vera, we can decipher that it is because of what 4 did to him back in BFB 3, and if you don't remember, 4 sent X to the burn center. This shows us that X still has some sort of trauma from 4's doings, and is a rare case of X actually being a bit scared of 4, not wanting to be hurt by him again. When X starts to burn, which is I guess a bit ironic, 4 supplies ice to the contestants, which again shows his favor of the show over X. As 4 is probably just able to make X not burn, he even dismisses X's pain and doesn't really care. Instead, he makes the next challenge revolve around this. In this episode, we saw 4 dismiss X a lot in favor of the show, which we haven't exactly seen before, which is interesting. In BFB 20, all I can really say is that 4 neglects X once again by simply making him not be on fire. But at the end of the episode, 4 does compliment X, so that's nice. Next episode, 4 gets angry at X for showing off his satisfaction detector, which again shows how 4 can sometimes be strict on X, almost similar to BFB 13. I'm just going to kind of skip BFB 22 to BFB 24 because nothing really happens between the two if that is worth mentioning. But I will mention X wanting to be the judge, but 4 taking that position from him. But X doesn't seem too distraught about this, and 4 scanning X's brain, meaning that there is a form of large trust between the two. And in BFB 24, 4 gets a bit irritated at X for announcing the merge before him. Now, in BFB 25, something happens that is actually pretty significant. X says that
4 are cursed!
which makes 4 pretty much kill X, or despawn I guess. This is the first time that 4 has killed X in the entire series. He has put him in situations that put him through pain, but those situations didn't kill him. This scene is very reminiscent of how 4 acted at the start of BFB, hurting X just because he said something that he disliked. X stays dead for the entire rest of the episode and was eventually recovered sometime before or during BFB 26. And in that episode, 4 kills X again just because he said,
You're a true blue friend.
I'm not blue.
This time, 4 does recover X immediately, but still, this is bad. Despite how much we have seen 4 grow since the start of BFB, he still does things that mimic how he was then. No matter how much his character develops, he always goes back to his attitude of being ridiculously violent over the smallest things. I want to believe that 4 has changed and developed, but I really find that hard to believe because he's still doing things like killing X twice in a row for basically no reason. Moving on from that, at the start of BFB 27, 4 refers to X as the best co-host that money can buy. But then right after this, he calls out X and gets angry at him for supposedly not doing anything as co-host. But X doesn't really listen to these comments. I guess what I can say about this interaction is that 4 is constantly changing his mind about X, sometimes complimenting him but also being rude about him, and we've seen this pattern play out the entire season. Next episode, when the announcer comes back to take back his show, 4 gets pretty angered at X for his suggestions on how to get rid of the announcer, but he compliments him right after for recovering properly. When 4 sinks into the ground, X is shown to be very concerned and tries to talk to 4. He helps the announcer with the challenge for the episode, but besides that, he tries his best to stick to 4, and we see this throughout BFB 29, not willing to really do anything regarding the show. This is probably the best demonstration so far of how loyal X truly is to 4. And I wouldn't say that if the roles were reversed, 4 wouldn't care about X, as we have seen before that 4 does sort of care about X, but that was mostly for the sake of the show. So I guess if the roles were reversed, 4 wouldn't really care as much as X has been. In the final episode of BFB, X goes on a journey to get 4 back, again showing his loyalty. 4 constantly tells X and the contestants that he is with to leave him alone. And like BFB 16, I get that 4 is mad and all, but he shouldn't be directing his anger towards X, especially because he has been the one to care about him the entire season, unlike the contestants, which is his point. When 4 finally decides to stop avoiding reality, X is very happy, similar to BFB 10. And like BFB 10, 4 is also pretty happy to see X back. So that was BFB. At the very start, we saw 4 be incredibly rude to X, and while he did start to get progressively better, he did start to get a bit rude near the end. And at the very end, the two seem to have made up and are now actual good friends. But we still have TPOT to get through, and while there isn't really much, the season still showcase how 4 and X's friendship could get a bit complicated. We see 4 and X return in TPOT 6, where they are now the chefs for the hotel. When Tennis Ball is trying to get food from the hotel, 4 defends X by killing Tennis Ball after he was scaring X. Right after, the two are seen flying happily together, so I guess even after this 2-year window between this episode and the end of BFB 30, 4 hasn't suddenly switched up on X, and the two seem to be on actually good terms now. We see 4 sort of defend X again later in the episode, and at the end of the episode, the two pair up and kill multiple contestants. We don't see much of 4 and X from TPOT 7 to TPOT 11. Okay, I lied. TPOT 11 literally mostly takes place inside 4. But besides that, TPOT 12 is the next time we could really see 4 and X, where they are co-hosts announcing that episode's challenge. And 4 drops X in a pit to demonstrate how deep the pits are. And I was just talking about how the two are finally good friends, and 4 goes and does this. Has he learned nothing from BFB? This character is so weird. Why does he switch up so much? Anyway, in the next episode, 4 brings X on a vacation away from the storm that is happening, so I guess they're still good friends. Yay. Skipping episodes 14 and 15, since nothing happens besides the two becoming hosts due to the timeline changing, they return in the very next episode being the actual host due to 2 being too depressed to host. Right off the bat, now that 4 is the actual host again, he's acting a lot similar to how he acted in early BFB, murdering contestants left and right, being pretty much completely unsympathetic. This can be because he dislikes the TPOT contestants more than his very own contestants, which in 4 logic I can sort of understand. He's rude to pretty much all the contestants, but he surprisingly doesn't get mad at X, even complimenting him while he's demonstrating the challenge. I guess the only negative thing that happens between the two is 4 killing a little alien X was watching, but this could have been TV that had done this, but I'd rather throw this interaction aside as it doesn't really matter. Despite this being the 4 and X episode of TPOT, I don't really have much to say regarding their friendship. They cooperate very well, better than how they would have in the past, and that's very good. 4 is extremely passive to the contestants in this episode, which is concerning, but he doesn't bring this anger towards X, so yeah, I guess 4 and X's friendship is technically improving. But 4 still is definitely not a good person. Skipping TPOT 17 as the two were occupied, and TPOT 18 as the two were separated despite 4 hosting yet again, we must now go to TPOT 19. A lot happens in this episode, but the most important here is 4 getting all his powers taken away and getting trapped in the moon, an event shown in the next episode. Before getting trapped, however, 4 screams for X to help him, and I know that 4 is extremely desperate in the scene, but I do believe that the two's friendship has grown to be so much better up to this very point. So 4 seeing X as his only way to get out of this situation actually seems genuine. And also because over time 4 has probably given X a lot of his power, showing that the two are progressively becoming better friends. Skipping TPOT 20 since I've already talked about it, we are now on TPOT 21. The absolute most recent episode we can see 4 and X completely up to date. X knows about 4's pleas for his help after reviewing footage from TPOT 19, and is now on a journey looking for 4 alongside Bubble, Match, and Ruby. Being honest, I think if the roles were swapped, I do think 4 would do the same. Despite 4 hurting X a bunch of times, the two's friendship has truly grown up to this very point. And this is how we end things, since I can't really go any further than this, because I don't know what happens next in the BFDI timeline. I know that TPOT 22 is out, but that episode mainly takes place in the past besides the very end, so I can't really talk about that. Overall, I think that 4 has been way too rude to X throughout all this time, but X has always been a loyal friend, and up to this point, 4 has hopefully realized this. And if X does find him in the moon, I hope that the two actually become good friends from that point on. I'm not ending this video yet though, because I do have one theory that may explain 4's weird shift in his personality towards X. It being why I think he changes so much from before BFB and when BFB starts. So this would have to have taken place before or during IDFB. Alright, so maybe before BFB started, X didn't want 4 to host BFB, and 4, being obsessed with BFDI and wanting to host it, starts being rude to X, which can explain the weird shift in his attitude when BFB does start. And yeah, that's the theory. And that's all I have for this video. What do you think about 4 and X's friendship? Do you think 4's in the wrong? Probably.